See, the big spiritual battles are taking place in the attitudes of the heart. They always have been that way. It's the little things. It's not those big dramatic spotlight moments. So patience itself is one of those things. That's why James says in our first verse this morning, be patient therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. So after calling out all of these selfish plans and slightly less than honest or even majorly dishonest dealings and all of that, he says, I want you to have a heaven first attitude. Be patient. Wait upon God. In his timing, he will do what he said that he's going to do. You may not understand how he's going to do it or when it will happen, but his day is going to happen. Be patient. And then he exemplifies patience by going back to an age-old example. See the farmer? See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it? And look at how he has to be patient about it until he receives the early and the late rains. Let's say I'm choosing the way of heaven. If that's the case, and I'm giving my life for yours, and in doing so, I planted heaven. That was a good choice. Now I'm waiting for heaven to come to full fruition in your life. I'm waiting for the yield of it. But I have to be aware that it comes in his time, not mine. So let's put it in terms that we can all understand. You shared your faith with a coworker or a family member, and you did so because you can see in their life is a wreck, it's a mess. And then you're thinking to yourself, okay, I shared it. Where's the change, God? Why haven't you shown up? Why aren't you changing them faster? Your timing is terrible. God, don't you know how limited their time is? As though you could teach him. Or maybe it goes like this. I just got a diagnosis that I do not like. God, time for you to show up because I know what I need right now. This isn't part of my plans. So, do it. But James already told us a heaven-first attitude says, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. If the Lord wills. So that has to be our first attitude in waiting on God, is saying, I've got to have a spirit of serenity, a spirit of quietness under all circumstances. Come on, there's certain circumstances where I justify it, right? This is where we need to have a firmness, a fixedness, a steadfastness, which characterizes a life that is lived for heaven as its foundation. Have patience. Have the patience of a farmer. Yes, you might get a blessing early on and you say, it's always going to be like this for the rest of my life. Those are called mountaintop experiences. Elijah had one of those. That's why he says you have to wait for the late rain as well. Have the patience of a farmer. He's not out there first planting one thing and then it rains and he goes, why isn't it coming up yet? Why don't I have a harvest yet? Dig it up. Let's plant something else. Back to verse 8. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Establish your hearts. May I remind you that it is not what goes into the body that spoils a man, but what comes out. And where does that come from? From the heart. James says that if we're steadfast and patient, then we will see what we have committed to, and we'll see how to commit to it as well. Look at verse 12. But above all, my brothers, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation. You see, if you're patient, if you are known as a patient person, as a steadfast person, there's no need for an oath at all. Look, if you're a steadfast person, you don't need to, because you'll be known as a person who says what they're going to do and then does it. There's no need for an oath if you're steadfast. If you're known for patience and constancy, then you will have no cause for anyone to complain against you. But if you don't apply those kinds of principles to your life, and you do end up becoming a person that isn't known for those things, guess what you're going to become? It says in this passage, actually. You're going to be a grumbler. You're going to be one that ends up grumbling. This is the negative application of a lack of patience, a lack of steadfastness. And this is where the battleground actually is on this issue in your own development, because grumbling is a destructive attitude of the heart. Grumbling? What's so bad about grumbling? I mean, everybody grumbles. You see, James could have said, hey, when people mistreat you or when people are irritable or whatever, he could have said, don't get revenge on them. Don't beat them. Right? He could have said that. I mean, that would be easier for us, right? Because for most of us, most of us, not everybody, but most of us have enough self-control that we're not ready to punch somebody out just because they irritate us. But that's not what James says. He doesn't even say that's the really bad part. He says, do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. You see, grumbling, you and I see that as, well, that's just complaining. Just complaining. But there's an aspect of grumbling in which we're trying to get at people. You see, grumbling is finding fault. Grumbling is nitpicking. And even as I say that, I probably could hear some of your thoughts saying, well, is that really that bad? It's clearly more serious than you and I tend to think. Maybe it's because I grumble more than I like to admit, but look at that verse. It says, you're going to be condemned for grumbling so that you may not be judged. Don't grumble so that you may not be judged. You see, you're going to be judged, according to that verse, by the judge who is standing at the door. That's the judge of the universe for grumbling. And because everybody engages in it, we think of it as not being so bad. I love social ethics. You can justify anything as long as you get enough people to do it. Our society loves to say a lot of people are doing it. It can't be that bad. Grumbling is worse than you and I think. It is a seed of something terribly poisonous and toxic in our heart. And so to really examine this, we've got to recall something that James said way back in chapter 4. He said in verse 11, do not speak evil against one another, brothers. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. There is only one lawgiver and judge who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? When you're grumbling, this is what you're doing. You're speaking evil against your neighbor, which according to our passage puts you at odds with the actual judge of the universe. This is serious. Like, God doesn't condemn things just because you enjoy them or because he enjoys giving you busy work, right? A doctor doesn't forbid a patient from eating something because it tastes good. I know, Gary, it seems like that, but he's not actually doing that. A doctor forbids a patient from eating something because that something is undermining their health. So God only condemns those things that are eating away at the fabric, at the peace in your hearts, at the relationships that you could have that could honor him. God designed a world in which there would be harmony, and anything he condemns is condemned because it is eroding that harmony. It's destructive to you and destructive to relationships. C.S. Lewis actually has it right in his book, The Great Divorce. If you've never read that, I highly recommend it. It is a tough read, but you will be better for doing it. He says this, the whole difficulty of hell is that it begins with a grumbling mood and yourself still distinct from it, perhaps criticizing it. You can repent and come out of it again, but there may come a day when you can no longer do that. Then there will be no you left to even criticize the mood, nor even to enjoy it, but just the grumble itself going on forever like a machine. Lewis says hell is endless autobiography. That's how he classifies it. Absolute self-absorption, concentration on nothing but you, and the attitude grows and grows. Why aren't you doing this for me? Why isn't this happening for me? This would be so much better if it was like that. Why is it taking so long? I can't believe they're acting like that. And that grumbling then becomes you. See, grumbling is always self-serving. I've never heard anyone complain because somebody else wasn't getting what they wanted. And when you become a grumbler, you can't stop thinking about yourself. Do you see how grumbling is contrary to patience? Your life for mine? You serve me. This is what grumbling is all about. There's nothing more enslaving than to be looking at every situation and saying, how does this serve me? The more self-absorbed one is, the more they drain everyone else of life. Do you see how serious it is? Grumbling will kill you and everybody around you eventually because it tears apart relationships. It pushes us away. So how do we overcome this deadly toxic issue? James says, patience. Really? That's it? Oh, have you ever prayed for patience? The Greek word is makrothumio, which actually means to be slow to anger, to be long-suffering. That's literally what it means, makrothumio, long-suffering. Long-suffering means you put up with a lot and you don't avenge yourself. The Psalms describe God as long-suffering. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. Do you see? So, how do you get patience, the long-suffering variety? Well, it's what we've been saying for weeks. You have to make yourself aware. You have to look in the mirror. You have to see how irritable you are, how whiny you've become. Oh, it's easy to see in others. We can point it out. Critical spirit. But it's much harder to see it in ourselves because grumbling people are often stuck in their own echo chamber. That's why you need a mirror to show you. And the best mirror for grumbling is community, what we're trying to destroy and push away through our grumbling. That's actually the best mirror for us for grumbling.